Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon English study group where we're studying the words of the Buddha in this book series titled The Words of the Buddha, The Path to Enlightenment, Revealing the Hidden. Today we're in Volume 3, Chapters 21 through 30. And the way that we do this particular class is we start with a brief meditation to prepare the mind for the class ahead. Then we'll have a student read each individual chapters, or I'll end up reading some of those chapters, or maybe all of them. And then as we read the chapters, I will share some teachings on that particular chapter, and then open up to any questions that you guys have. The way that this typically works best is where the students have actually been reading the chapters prior to class, because there's a lot of details there that you can digest. You can learn, reflect, and start to practice those teachings, and then you come to class and ask questions. This class is more of a study group versus me actually sharing a discourse like I do in some of the other programs that I teach. So I'd like to welcome you if you're joining for the first time or you've been joining regularly. As I mentioned, we'll be reading the chapters in class, so if you haven't read them prior to class, it's okay. You'll be able to learn in class with us today. So I'd like to invite you to join for meditation. If you're sitting in a chair or on the floor, you might make your lower body nice and comfortable with your hands and arms comfortable in your lap. Then if you would like to bring your upper body to a nice erect position, this keeps the mind attentive and alert during the meditation so that you can actively train the mind during the meditation. We're going to do some chanting to ease into the meditation and ease out, and then I'll provide you some guidance after the chanting. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Bhagavanang Abhivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti pisu Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavito อนุเตโรปุริสาดามาสติสตาตาวามนุสนังโพโตภาควาติ Okay, you'd like to just develop a nice, steady, consistent breath. Breathing in through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you get to it, breathe out through the nose. Here you're just establishing the breath. Breathing in and out. Your breath isn't going to necessarily match up with the guidance that I'm providing. This is your practice. So whenever you get to your inhale, breathe in through the nose. And whenever you get to the exhale, breathe out gradually through the nose. Breathing in and out. Once the breath is established, start fixating the mind on the breath. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath. There's no need to label the thought, observe it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Just wherever you observe that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath. Breathing in and out. หังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมหาเกวาพุทธังมหาเกวันหังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาเกวตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเกวโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหะเกวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิจาจารณังสัมมุโนสคาโตโรกาวิโตอนุเตโรปุริสานามาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังพุทโธภควาติ Okay, if you guys would like to make your way out of meditation, we'll go ahead and we'll switch over to studying the words of the Buddha. Again, we're in volume 3, chapters 21 through 30. And those of you guys that are in Zoom, if you would like to read, you can raise your hand and you'll be able to read any of the chapters that we're studying today. Those of you guys in Facebook, YouTube, and Zoom, you can ask questions as we go. All you need to do is put that into the comment section and I'll be able to see your questions. If you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any question or follow a question directly. Are there any students in Zoom who would like to read any of the chapters? Okay, it doesn't look like anyone's volunteering to read, so I'll go ahead and read the chapters. Chapter 21 is titled Gain, Honor, and Praise Are an Obstacle Even for an Arahant. Monks, gain, honor, and praise, I say, are an obstacle even for a monk who is an Arahant, one with taints destroyed. When this was said, the Venerable Ananda asked the Master Teacher Gotama, "Why, Venerable Sir, are gain, honor, and praise an obstacle even for a monk with taints destroyed?" I do not say, Ananda, that gain, honor, and praise are an obstacle to his unshakable liberation of mind, but I say they are an obstacle to his attainment of those peaceful dwellings in this very life which are achieved by one who resides diligent, dedicated, and determined. So dreadful, Ananda, are gain, honor, and praise, so bitter, vile, obstructive to achieving the unsurpassed security from bondage, enlightenment. Therefore, Ananda, you should train yourselves thus. We will abandon the arisen gain, honor, praise, and we will not let the arisen gain, honor, and praise persist, obsessing our mind. Thus should you train yourselves. So here, let's share a few things to help you guys as you're learning this particular teaching. First of all, an arahant is an individual who's enlightened. This is the fourth stage of enlightenment. As the mind is making its way to enlightenment, there's 4 preliminary phases that the mind goes through, which are called the jhanas. And then there's 4 stages of enlightenment, which are stream enter, once returner, non-returner, and arahant. The 4th stage of enlightenment is an arahant. This individual is enlightened. They're no longer experiencing any discontent feelings whatsoever. The mind is peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy permanently for the rest of this life, and they've escaped the cycle of rebirth. They've extinguished all their unwholesome karma. They're practicing the Eightfold Path and all the connected teachings in detail. They have deep wisdom about the teachings, and they're now able to go forward in life without any discontentedness whatsoever. As part of getting to enlightenment, they would need to have eliminated what's called the 10 fetters. These are 10 individual pollutions of mind, or taints. These are what keeps the mind in the unenlightened state. So an individual who has progressed to arahant as an enlightened being will have eliminated the 10 fetters, or the taints. This is where the Buddha is explaining one with taints destroyed. So here the Buddha starts out with saying, monks, gain honor and praise, I say, are an obstacle, even for a monk who is an arahant, one with taints destroyed. So in order to become an arahant, you would need to destroy the taints. You would need to destroy or eliminate the 10 fetters. And his close student Ananda, who was with him pretty much throughout his entire teaching career, asked a very interesting question, because Ananda says, excuse me, Buddha, Venerable Sir, why are gain, honor, and praise an obstacle even for a monk who have their taints destroyed? Because if a monk's mind, or any individual's mind, have the 10 fetters eliminated, even as a household practitioner, you can accomplish the same thing. Then why is gain, honor, and praise an obstacle? Because what gain, honor, and praise will typically do is it will arise conceit in the mind. It will arise this arrogance and pride, this boastfulness, this judging and measuring and comparing, putting yourself above and below others. This is the ego. And for an arahant, one whose taints are destroyed, they would no longer have ego, because the conceit in the mind would be eliminated. So Ananda asked a very valid question here, is like, hold on, why is gain, honor, and praise an obstacle for an individual who's destroyed all the fetters? Because they would no longer have conceit, their mind would be unaffected, it wouldn't be shaken up any longer. So then the Buddha clarifies. He says, I do not say, Ananda, that gain, honor, and praise are an obstacle to his unshakable liberation of mind. So once the mind is already liberated and having taints destroyed, the fetters are eliminated, gain, honor, and praise are not an obstacle to his unshakable mind, his unshakable freedom of mind. It's not an obstacle to this individual who's actually enlightened. But I say, they are an obstacle to his attainment of those peaceful dwellings in this very life, which are achieved by one who resides diligent, dedicated, and determined. So he's saying gain, honor, and praise is an obstacle for your attainment of enlightenment. Because oftentimes when the mind is on the way to enlightenment, because conceit is still there, when someone praises you, or there's a certain gain, or there's this certain honor that's bestowed upon you, it might arise this arrogance or this pride or this ego in the mind. So as long as you allow gain, honor, and praise to arise in the mind's conceit is still there, and you won't be able to get to enlightenment. So your attainment of enlightenment, this gain, honor, and praise is an obstacle to you. The Buddha says, so dreadful, Ananda, are gain, honor, and praise, so bitter, vile, obstructive to achieving the unsurpassed security from bondage. So to achieve enlightenment, gain, honor, and praise are, the Buddha is describing it as bitter, vile, obstructive to achieving this freedom of mind, this freedom from the discontent feelings, attaining enlightenment. So he gives this guidance, therefore, Ananda, you should train yourselves thus. We will abandon the arisen gain, honor, and praise, and we will not let the arisen gain, honor, and praise persist obsessing our minds. Thus should you train yourself. So what he's teaching is to cut off and let go of any arisen gain, honor, and praise. So what the Buddha is describing is that when this gain, honor, and praise is arising in the mind, to cut it off and let it go. Because if you allow this gain, honor, and praise to arise in the mind, then this is going to end up hindering you in being an obstacle to actually getting to your enlightenment. So as long as you allow this gain, honor, and praise to persist, then it's going to block you or hinder you or be an obstacle for your attainment of this enlightened mental state. So by you training your mind to be observant that, okay, somebody's sharing this gain, honor, and praise, not allowing the mind to dwell in any kind of arisen feeling. So where you observe this agreeable contact and there's perhaps pleasant feelings arising, you might say thank you, or I appreciate your kind words, or you might just smile. How you choose to handle it is based on your own individual character and your own personality. But what you're not interested in doing is allowing that gain, honor, and praise to obsess the mind and persist, thus arising conceit in the mind. This will cause you difficulties in getting to enlightenment because it's going to arise this conceit. So what you do is you use right mindfulness from the Eightfold Path, which is awareness of mind. You use right effort, which is also from the Eightfold Path, where you cut off and let go of that unwholesome quality of any conceit that might be arising. And then you bring into the mind, with right effort, this humbleness, where the mind can be humble. That's what you're actually working to achieving, is having this humbleness in the mind. So here, this is what the Buddha is describing, is ensuring that the mind can be humble as part of your journey to enlightenment. So what the Buddha is describing here is training the mind to be humble and down to earth, not boastful. So what you would like to do is use the right mindfulness to be aware of any gain, honor, and praise when someone's sharing that with you right away. That should be like something in the mind clicks to ensure that you're not allowing the mind to become obsessed with any conceit or any pleasant feelings. And where you observe that, use right effort from the Eightfold Path to cut that off, cut that unwholesome quality of arisen gain, honor, and praise, arisen conceit, arisen obsession of the mind with this agreeable contact, and then you can arise the wholesome quality through right effort of being humble and down to earth, not being boastful, just being humble. That's what you'd like to practice here. So let me see what questions you guys have. You can put those into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. You can raise your hand in Zoom, and I'll be able to call on you and be sure that you're able to ask any questions that you'd like. Okay, Amina has a question here on Facebook. It says, gain, honor, and praise are so obstructive because when those feelings are absent, if the mind became attached, would then miss those feelings when they are absent. Perhaps, yes. But more importantly, what gain, honor, and praise will typically do is arise conceit in the mind. There'll be this arrogance and this pride in the mind. But yes, if you are attached to this agreeable contact, that you're always looking for some kind of gain, some kind of honor, some kind of praise, and your mind longs and yearns for that, your conduct might be such that you're only making decisions in order to get praise from somebody in your life partner, your friends, your family, your boss, your teacher, people around you. If you're attached to hearing this gain, honor, and praise when you're not getting it and it's not there, yeah, your mind would miss it. You might even feel boredom or loneliness. But what I observed is that when there's gain, honor, and praise, it oftentimes arises conceit in the mind. But the mind could also experience what you're describing, Amina, which is if the mind's craving and longing and yearning for this gain, honor, and praise, when it's not there, the mind could actually miss it. So if somebody says something that is agreeable, that's gain, honor, and praise, you can't control that. You can't control what they say and when they say it. So if somebody says it, all you can do is control your mind not to experience these conditioned pleasant feelings and not to arise this conceit. So that's where you might say, thank you, I appreciate your kind words, or, oh, you're so friendly, or you're so kind, or whatever you might say, or you might just smile. Right? It just depends. It's up to you how you choose to practice. The Buddha doesn't tell you what to do in each individual situation. He's just sharing the guidance with you to not allow this gain, honor, and praise to obsess the mind. Don't crave for it either. And then when somebody says something degrading or disparaging, if you don't allow the mind to get this pleasant feelings when there's gain, honor, and praise, then if somebody says something degrading and disparaging, you won't experience any painful feelings either. All right, so Amina's following this up with an example. She's saying, last year we donated almost 100 books to our daughter's school, and we only realized now that no one thanked us. So perhaps we were somehow attached to having a desire for honor, which we need to work on releasing. Yes, if you're noticing that in the mind, that you were wanting somebody to say thank you, then you would like to let that go. Because when you're practicing generosity, which is what you did by donating 100 books, you would like to do that without any kind of expectations or any kind of wants. You're just doing it in order to train the mind to practice generosity and let go of craving, desire, attachment. So if somebody says, thank you, okay, that's fine, but you're not looking for that. You're not craving it. You're not expecting it. And there you can have the mind fully protected, because as long as the mind is practicing generosity and wanting something back for that, it's not pure generosity. There's still craving, desire, attachment there. So when you practice pure generosity, where you don't want anything in return, you don't have any expectation, then your mind can be protected. Because if somebody says thank you, okay, fine. You'll probably say you're welcome, pleased to help you, or whatever you might say. But if they don't say thank you, then you're fine with that as well. And you know that you just practiced this generosity because you were interested in helping, and you were perhaps training your mind to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. So yes. All right. Thank you for your question, Amina. I see some questions here in YouTube. How to practice Kanti. I'm not sure what language that is. If you would like to write that in English, I'll be pleased to answer your question. But since it's not English, I'm not sure what Kanti is. So you can clarify that if you like. All right, it doesn't look like we have any more questions in Facebook or YouTube. You're welcome, Amina. Pleased to help you. Let's move on to the next chapter. The next chapter is chapter 22. Again, if there's anyone in Zoom that would like to read this chapter, you're welcome to do that. I will go ahead and open up your mic so that you guys can go ahead and read the chapter if you like. But if not, I'll go ahead and just continue reading. This chapter 22 is titled, How is a Monk Mindful in Exercising Clear Comprehension? And how, monks, is a monk mindful? Here, monks, a monk resides reflecting on the body in the body, dedicated, clearly comprehending, mindful, having put away craving and displeasure in regard to the world. He resides reflecting on feelings in feelings, dedicated, clearly comprehending, mindful, having put away craving and displeasure in regard to the world. He resides reflecting on mind in mind, dedicated, clearly comprehending, mindful, having put away craving and displeasure in regard to the world. He resides reflecting on mental objects in mental objects, dedicated, clearly comprehending, mindful, having put away craving and displeasure in regard to the world. It is in such a way that a monk is mindful. And how, monks, does a monk exercise clear comprehension? Here, monks, a monk is one who acts with clear comprehension, when going forward and returning, when looking ahead and looking aside, when drawing in and extending the limbs, when wearing his robes and carrying his outer robe in bowl, when eating, drinking, chewing his food and tasting, when defecating and urinating, when walking, standing, sitting, falling asleep, waking up, speaking, and keeping silent. It is in such a way that a monk exercises clear comprehension. All right, so what the Buddha is describing here is he's giving you some detail on the 2 steps of the Eightfold Path called right mindfulness and right concentration. In the step of right mindfulness, on the Eightfold Path, in that teaching, he basically teaches what is being shared here about mindfulness, where he's sharing the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Body is body, feelings is feelings, mind is mind, and mental objects is mental objects. Here he's helping you to understand the bodily sensations, the feelings, the condition of the mind, and the mental objects. These are 4 foundations of mindfulness, or 4 things that you're going to need to become aware of. Because what mindfulness is awareness of mind. But more specifically, as you deepen your practice, you would like to develop awareness of these 4 things. So you might start with just awareness of mind. That's how you kind of start the path to enlightenment, with understanding right mindfulness. But as you go deeper into your practice, developing your breathing mindfulness meditation and practicing mindfulness in daily life, you would like to become aware of those bodily sensations that are occurring prior to the mind becoming discontent. Prior to anger or sadness or frustration or other discontent feelings that are arising, even those pleasant feelings, there are certain bodily sensations that are occurring prior to the discontentedness. And you would like to become aware of those and cut off and let go of any discontentedness as a bodily sensation. Because if you don't cut it off and let it go there, it's going to become a feeling in the mind. So now the anger has just arisen in the mind as a feeling. But you could have cut it off and let it go as a bodily sensation and saved yourself a whole lot of difficulty and a whole lot of trouble. This isn't suppressing the feelings or repressing them. You're actually cutting off and letting go before it ever becomes a feeling. So you're getting more discipline or control of the mind. Where the mind is sad or angry or frustrated or other discontent feelings, you don't have discipline or control of the mind. That's why the mind is doing that. So by you observing with mindfulness or awareness of mind those bodily sensations and cutting it off and letting it go there, you're disciplining the mind, you're controlling the mind rather than allowing the mind to run away like a wild animal and then become feelings of anger in the mind. You can also cut it off as a feeling. If it's penetrated into the mind, you can cut off and let go of the feeling of anger, for example, in this example. But if you don't cut it off as a feeling, it's then going to affect the condition of the mind. Have you ever been angry for multiple hours or days or maybe a week or two? This is what the mind does. When you miss it as a bodily sensation, you miss it as a feeling, you then affects the condition of the mind. And if you don't cut it off there as a condition of the mind, it then forms or feeds this mental object, in this example, ill will. So the Buddha is alerting you to this process that discontentedness takes. There's going to be these bodily sensations, feelings, condition of the mind, and mental objects that get formed. This is all occurring because of craving, desire, attachment. If there was no craving, desire, attachment in the mind, there wouldn't be any arising of bodily sensations, feelings. The condition of the mind wouldn't be affected with discontentedness, and all the mental objects would have been eliminated. That's what the enlightened mind is experiencing. So what the Buddha is cluing you into here and in other parts of his teachings is to be aware of these four things and start to cut off and let go of the bodily sensations, essentially putting a blockade on any arising discontentedness. As you do this and you control the mind more and more, you're eliminating craving, desire, attachment. So when the bodily sensations are starting to happen, the mind is alerting you through the bodily sensations, hey, I'm about to create some conditioned feelings. I'm about to create conditioned feelings of pleasant feelings, painful feelings, feelings that are neither painful nor pleasant. And it's based on some condition. And if you don't cut it off and let it go as a bodily sensation, I'm going to create these conditioned feelings. And if you allow that to continue to occur, the mind's going to continue to do that. So you're disciplining the mind and saying, no, I'm not going to let you create conditioned feelings based on some impermanent condition. Because as long as you keep doing that, Mr. Mind or Mrs. Mind, you're not going to be able to experience liberation of mind because you've got those cravings in there that continue to base its inner feelings on some impermanent condition. So I'm going to cut it off and let it go as a bodily sensation so that you can save yourself all this difficulty. And in the meantime, you're working on breaking up these mental objects. The 10 fetters are mental objects. So in this example, the ill will is a mental object. So while you're cutting off and letting go of any arising anger, frustration, irritation, annoyance, you're cutting that off as a bodily sensation and protecting the mind. At the same time, you're using something like loving kindness meditation to break up this mental object of ill will, so that you can do that in loving kindness meditation. And then in daily life, you're practicing loving kindness through your intention, speech, and your actions. And this will clean out this whole process of the mind now basing its inner feelings of anger, hatred, ill will, this frustration, irritation, annoyance, based on cravings, desires, attachments. But you need to be aware of this in this process in order to circumvent it and get ahead of it so that you can then clean up the mind. So that's why the Buddha is teaching here how to achieve this mindfulness. And he teaches this in the Eightfold Path as well, connected to other teachings. Then he's teaching about right concentration, which here he's referring to as exercising clear comprehension, because right concentration is to have singleness of mind, where you can be focused and concentrated. You got to have clarity of mind. And because of this, clearing out these pollutions, you get this deep memory in the mind. But you wouldn't be able to do that if you allowed the mind to rapidly cycle from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing to thing to thing. Today we call this multitasking. But the mind can't actually multitask. It can only actually do one thing at a time. So what the Buddha is teaching you here is to only ever do one thing at a time. He says, here, monks, a monk is one who acts with clear comprehension when going forward and returning. So when you're walking forward and you're walking back, when you're looking ahead or you're looking to the side, just do one thing at a time. Drawing in your limbs or extending your limbs, wearing certain clothes, or eating. Make sure when you're eating, or when you're drinking, you're drinking. You're just focused on drinking. If you've ever been drinking and thinking about something else, you might have choked on the liquid. Or if you've ever been eating and then trying to talk at the same time, you might have choked, right? So here the Buddha is explaining to you, just eat when you're eating. And when you're drinking, just drink. When you're chewing your food, just chew your food. When you're tasting, you just taste. You slow down the mind and just do one thing at a time. If you've ever been defecating or urinating and you're on your mobile phone, you might have dropped your mobile phone. Some people drop them in the toilet and they damage their mobile phone. This is because the mind can't do two things at one time. It can only do one thing. So you can clean up your practice and practice this singleness of mind, where you're walking, you're standing, you're sitting, you're falling asleep, you're waking up, you're speaking, you're keeping silent. You're doing just one thing at a time and focusing that way. And when you're training your mind to have singleness of mind, more and more the mind will do this naturally. As you're first developing this practice, it can be kind of challenging for the mind to do this because it's used to rapidly cycling from thing to thing to thing to thing. But you would like to kind of train the mind to be in this groove, in this middle way, where it's practicing concentration and focus. It's kind of like if you took a piece of steel and there was a piece of wood and you were grinding that steel back and forth on the wood, you would get this deeper and deeper groove into the wood. But initially, there's not much of a groove there, so it would easily pop out to either side. That's what happens with the mind, is it easily pops out because you're not used to practicing singleness of mind. But the more you practice it in meditation, where you're just focused on the breath and only the breath, and then outside of meditation, you're only doing one thing at a time, then your mind gets more and more used to doing this. It's like this deeper and deeper groove, and it won't pop out. So by the time you train your mind to get to enlightenment, you'll be practicing singleness of mind, just doing one thing at a time, and you'll be able to bring your full concentration, your full focus to whatever it is that you're facing in any particular situation. And this is how you bring your full wisdom to be able to make wise decisions, because you would find it utterly challenging to be able to practice something like right speech if you were trying to talk on the phone, watch TV, and eat at the same time. Your mind's going to be rapidly cycling between these three things. You're not going to be able to practice something like right speech, let alone all the other teachings. Therefore, you're going to damage the relationship. You're going to make unwise decisions. So by training your mind that when you're loading clothes in the washing machine, just load the clothes in the washing machine. When you're taking them out, you're just taking them out. When you're hanging them up, you're just hanging them up. When you're washing dishes, you're just washing dishes. Each individual thing that you're just doing one thing at a time. And this is how you ensure you're making wise decisions that lead to wholesome results. Whereas if you're not doing that, you're going to make unwise decisions and you're going to then experience unwholesome results. So even in a class like this where you're listening to my voice, if you notice the mind wandering, cut that off, let it go, and come back. You might be thinking about what you're going to do after class or what you were doing yesterday. If there was something that you were doing yesterday, the mind might drift to the past or to the future. Cut that off. This is training for you to be able to listen to a voice. Whether you're attending live or you're listening to the replay, this is good training for you to be able to practice singleness of mind. Let me see what questions you guys have. Again, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, and I'll be able to help answer any questions that you have. Here's a question on Facebook. It says, my relatives don't help me while I'm very sick. So I've been my enemy. Well, I don't suggest that you consider anybody your enemy. This wouldn't be wise. This is just a choice that those people are making. They're choosing not to take care of you. Perhaps you might decide to look at your own decisions and what you've been deciding to do. Have you been loving and kind and compassionate in situations where they've needed help? Perhaps you have, perhaps you haven't. You need to look at that and decide if you've been making wise choices, because if you've been making wise choices in the relationships around you about the people you choose to involve in your life and how you treat those people, when you're sick, there would be people that would be willing to take care of you. So you're going to need to look at the decisions that you're making about the people to involve in your life and how you treat those people during daily life. Let's see. Okay, so this question that was asked earlier with the word that is not known to me, the person is saying that it means patience or endurance. So here, how do I practice patience or endurance? Well, as long as there's craving, desire, attachment in the mind, there's going to be this impatience in the mind. There's going to be a lack of patience. So what you need to do is eliminate craving, desire, attachment. This will help the mind to develop patience. And the Eightfold Path is how you eliminate craving, desire, attachment. There's breathing, mindfulness, meditation, generosity, but there's also other teachings that you're going to need as well. So be sure that you're looking at the Eightfold Path. You're learning that inside and out, backwards and forwards. I've taught that in other classes, and you can watch the recordings, you can get help personally, you can read the books, you can learn the Eightfold Path, because you're going to need to practice that inside and out, backwards and forwards, to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, and that's what's going to promote the patience. But as long as you have craving, desire, attachment in the mind, you're going to find it very challenging to have patience. Here's a question from Chrissy on YouTube. She's saying, Teacher David, is it beneficial for the mind to listen to classes while working? It is understood that it isn't being single-minded. However, sometimes this is how I practice when life is busy. So there's kind of this understanding of how the mind needs to progress. Oftentimes when we first start off on a path, or even as we're getting going, particularly if you have a lot of obligations in your life, like a single mom or something like that, you have very limited time because your life is kind of full with all these things that are going on, right? So when you're first starting out, and even as you're getting going, and particularly as a single parent, you might have a lot of things going on in your life. And your only option is to listen to a podcast while you're driving, or to listen to a live class while you're working. That might be your only option. And if that's your only option, then at least you're getting the teachings somewhat to a degree into the mind to then be able to start understanding them and practicing them. But ultimately what you would like to get to is where you've cleared out your life and you've got it organized in such a way that you do have dedicated time to be able to learn the content from the classes, and you can just focus on that. But in the meantime, as somebody's just starting to build up their practice and haven't yet had the opportunity to clear out certain aspects in their practice, you might actually be listening to a podcast and working, or listening to a podcast and driving, or listening to the live class and working. And if this is all that you can manage, then that's better than nothing at all. But then just gradually work towards the goal, which is what you're doing with all these teachings, is you're dialing in this practice more and more. Where maybe before you were working, listening to music, doing this, doing that, maybe you're doing 3 or 4 things, or attempting to do that, rapidly cycling from thing to thing. Maybe now you're just working and listening to the classes or a podcast. So that's less than where you were before. But ultimately what you'd like to do is get to the point where you're just doing one thing at a time, and you've cleared out aspects of your life to be able to do that. And of course, that takes time to be able to do that. You're very welcome, Chrissy. I see you say thank you there. You're very welcome. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next chapter, which is chapter 23. Here we just got a short chapter. It's titled Wonderful and Marvelous Quality of the Tathagata. The Tathagata is the Buddha. So here it says, that being so, Ananda, remember this too as a wonderful and marvelous quality of the Tathagata. Hear, Ananda, for the Tathagata, feelings are known as they arise, as they are present, as they disappear. Perceptions are known as they arise, as they are present, as they disappear. Thoughts are known as they arise, as they are present, as they disappear. Remember this too, Ananda, as a wonderful and marvelous quality of the Tathagata. So here the Buddha is explaining a quality of his mind and how he practices. He's not boasting and saying how wonderful and marvelous he is. He's explaining a quality of his mind and helping others to know that they need to practice this as well. An individual who's enlightened and surely a Buddha isn't going to have conceit. They're not going to be boastful about what's going on. Instead, he needs to explain how his mind functions, because an enlightened mind functions very differently than an unenlightened mind. And an unenlightened being who's aspiring to attain enlightenment would need to know things like this and others that is going on in the mind of an enlightened being, in a Buddha. So the Buddha is saying that when there's feelings that arise, as they are present and as they disappear, he knows that this is occurring. In other words, he has mindfulness. He's aware that these feelings arise, that they are present, and then that they disappear. The same thing with perceptions. What a perception is a perception is how you view the world, certain opinions and views that you have about the world. So he knows when those arise, he knows when they're present, and he knows when they disappear. And the same thing with thoughts, that he can see his mind, and he has such clarity and comprehension of the mind, he can see the feelings, the perceptions, and the thoughts when they arise, when they're present, and when they disappear. And this is what you would like to be able to do. Instead of your mind rapidly cycling and not being able to see clearly what's going on in the mind, you'd like to be able to see each individual one of these things. Questions on this, you can put those into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, and I'll be able to see those and answer them for you. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions on this particular chapter, so we'll go ahead and move on to the next one, which is chapter 24. Here, the title of the chapter is The 6 Subjects of Conscious Awareness. How many subjects of conscious awareness are there, Ananda? So this is the Buddha asking a student a question. This is somewhat common. A teacher will ask their students a question, and this is how we confirm whether a student understands or not. By just continuing to teach and teach and teach and teach, you don't necessarily know what your student's mind understands. So oftentimes a teacher will ask a student a question, and this helps us to understand what you understand, so that then we can help you further and guide you further on the path. So after the Buddha asked this question, how many subjects of conscious awareness are there, Ananda? Ananda replies, there are, Venerable Sir, 5 subjects of conscious awareness. Good, good, Ananda. Therefore, Ananda, remember this 6th subject of conscious awareness too. Here, ever mindful, a monk goes forward. Ever mindful, he returns. Ever mindful, he stands. Ever mindful, he sits. Ever mindful, he lies down to sleep. Ever mindful, he undertakes work. This subject of conscious awareness, developed and cultivated in this way, leads to mindfulness and clear comprehension. So here the Buddha is providing these 6 aspects of conscious awareness, of things that you're going to need to be aware of in order to have this full awareness of the mind, mindfulness and clear comprehension. That as you walk forward, be aware that you're walking forward. Look at the surface, be aware that you're calmly walking forward. Or you're walking back, right? Or you're standing, or sitting, or you're lying down to sleep, or you're doing any kind of work. See, this is where the Buddha is explaining to you, Chrissy, to just do work, right? So that would be ideal, is just to be aware of the work that you're doing so you can do a really thorough job and make really wise decisions about your work. But as we mentioned, in some cases, you might need to listen to some teachings in order to build up your practice and get to the point where you can actually focus on just the work. So you're a work in progress. This mind is transitioning closer and closer to the ideal. So if you guys are practicing all 6 of these, wonderful. If you're not, then these are things that you would like to improve, that you're just consciously aware with mindfulness or awareness of mind whenever you're doing any of these things. As you're lying down to sleep, you're not interested in just plopping down. You're interested in gradually lying down. If you're going to sit or you're going to stand up, consciously do that. Don't just plop down on the sofa, or don't just haphazardly stand up, right? Have you ever got like lightheaded when you just haphazardly stand it up, like really quickly? This is because of the mind not having this awareness, and the body wasn't capable of just, rapidly standing up. So the Buddha is giving you guidance of how to conduct yourself in a way that's going to ensure your mind has its awareness and you're able to function in the world in wise ways. He's helping you understand the natural law of karma. Whereas if you just plop down in a sofa or a chair, you could hurt your back, you could hurt your tailbone, you could affect things, you could, kind of flop your arms out and knock over a lamp or break something, right? So he's helping you to develop this awareness of mind where you're just always aware of what's going on in the mind. This is mindfulness. And then because of that, you will then be able to purify the mind with right effort to eliminate certain unwholesome qualities and arise certain wholesome qualities. And because of this, eliminating the pollution of mind, you will then be able to experience more and more right concentration, where you have focus, concentration, clarity of mind, and deep memory, which will help you in daily life. And you're gradually building up this practice to be able to do that. So let me know what questions you guys have on this. Again, you can put those into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, and I'll be able to see those. Here's a question from Chrissy. Can you please explain that a little more? The head get lightheaded a lot when standing. Are you saying it's because I'm not thinking of standing first? Perhaps you can take it more slow. That's her follow-up question. Or maybe do it slower. Yes, that's what you would like to do. When you're sitting in a chair and you're about to stand up, think about it. Okay, I'm about to stand up. Now consciously make the decision to gradually stand up. It doesn't have to be slow. It doesn't have to be like old and decrepit, but just consciously make a decision. Okay, I'm going to stand up, and then gradually stand up. That you're not just popping up really quickly from one position to the other. Because when there's craving in the mind's going to want to go, 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 go. It wants to get everything fast because it's craving those pleasant feelings, and it wants to hurry up and get those pleasant feelings. And it's going to chase after its cravings, and it wants to hurry up and get the objects of its affection so that it can get those pleasant feelings. It's almost like a drug addict chasing a drug. So oftentimes when the mind has craving, there's going to be this rapid progression of things in the mind. You're going to make very rapid decisions. So you would like to slow down and just make very conscious decisions. This will help you tremendously in all parts of your life, no matter what you're doing in life, by being able to make one decision at a time and being very thoughtful in the way that you're making your decisions, even including standing up. You're welcome, Chrissy. Pleased to help you. All right. So that takes care of the questions in YouTube. I see this individual, Sue Me, is asking some additional questions not related to these chapters, but I'll go ahead and help you. The question you're asking is, I've been in pain for 24 hours, how to deal with it? Understand that the pain that you're experiencing is impermanent, that you can make wise decisions to eliminate this pain. So the body isn't going to be permanently comfortable. So you need to understand that any kind of sickness, this is impermanent. So not only is the permanent comfort of the body impermanent, it's not going to be permanent. So the health of the body is impermanent, but also the unhealthy condition of the body is also impermanent. So remind yourself of that this unhealthiness of the body is impermanent. You can make wise decisions to move beyond this, whether it's taking medicine, seeing doctors, whether it's eating certain foods or drinking certain fluids. You can get to the point where health is restored, but it's going to require some patience. It's going to require you to be calm, make some wise decisions, and realize that this unhealthy condition is impermanent. Also, if your mind is craving and longing and yearning to do the things that you normally do. So if you're at home with sickness and you're craving to go outside, you're craving to go to work, you're craving to go spend time with your friends, you're craving to do this thing or the other thing, that's going to promote discontentedness in the mind too. So when the body is sick, the mind typically becomes discontent in the unenlightened state because you're craving permanent health, but you're also craving to go outside or go to work or go see your friends or go do all the things that you normally do. You need to train the mind that, hey, if just laying in bed and being sick is what you need to do at this point, then just do that really, really well. Lay in bed and be sick, right? Watch TV, listen to a podcast. You're listening to this class, you're learning. Outstanding, right? This is how you use your time. If you allow craving to persist where you want to be healthy, or you want to be outside, or you want to go to work, or you want all these things, you're going to experience discontentedness. So just restrain the mind from those cravings, realize that the body's sick, make some wise decisions with medications, doctors, food, fluids, things like this, and restore health. And then gradually work towards that. Understand that this sickness is impermanent, but also the health of the body is impermanent too. That's why you're sick. Okay. All right. So I don't see any questions in any of our normal places. So I will move on to the next chapter, which is chapter 25. Here, this is titled, Having Full Awareness When Lying Down. Ananda, if his mind inclines to lying down, he lies down, thinking, while I am lying down thus, no evil, unwholesome states will invade me. In this way, he has full awareness of that. Okay, so what the Buddha is explaining here, and he's explained in other teachings as well, that's not this one, is he talks about practicing mindfulness at all times. Every waking moment, you need to be practicing mindfulness because unwholesome thoughts can invade the mind at any point in time, and you need to be aware when those unwholesome thoughts are there. But you also need to be aware of the wholesome thoughts, because when you see the wholesome thoughts, you would like to encourage those, support those, don't allow them to fade. So every waking moment, you need to have this awareness of the mind or mindfulness and not being complacent and allowing the mind to run away in random thoughts. Because if you do that, you don't have discipline or control of the mind. So you need to get to the point, even when you're lying down, when you're dozing off to sleep, you know, that 10 minutes, 20 minutes, however long it takes you to fall asleep, there might be some certain thoughts that are starting to invade your mind at that point. You need to remain aware and be able to cut those off and let them go whenever those unwholesome thoughts might invade the mind. Or when you're waking up in the morning and you're starting to have certain thoughts, if you're like, oh gosh, I gotta go to work one more day. Oh, I hate this job. Well, first of all, you probably should consider looking for another job, right? But you're also not interested in those unwholesome mental states to invade the mind. So where you're seeing that, even when you're lying down, don't be complacent. Using right mindfulness, having awareness of mind, when you see those unwholesome states arising, use right effort to cut those off and let those go. Train the mind and purify it, that at all waking hours, all waking moments, that you're practicing awareness of mind. And anytime you see something unwholesome, you apply right effort to cut it off and let it go. And wherever you see wholesome thoughts, you support those, encourage those, don't allow them to fade, applying right effort. Let me know what questions you guys have, either through Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, and then I'll be able to answer your questions on this particular chapter. I'm not seeing any questions here. So I'm going to move on to the next chapter, which is chapter 26. This one is titled, From Darkness to Light, From Light to Light. In how, great king, is a person one headed from darkness to light? Here, some person has been reborn in a low family, a family of condols, bamboo workers, hunters, cartwrights, or waste collectors, a poor family in which there is little food and drink, in which subsist with difficulty, one where food and clothing are obtained with difficulty, and he is ugly, unsightly, deformed, chronically blind, or crippled-handed, or lame, or paralyzed. He is not one who gains food, drink, clothing, and vehicles, garland, scents, and ointments, bedding, housing, and lighting. He engages in wholesome conduct of body, speech, and mind. Having done so, with the breakup of the body after death, he is reborn in a good destination, in a heavenly world. Suppose, great king, a man would climb from the ground onto a palanquin, or from a palanquin onto horseback, or from horseback to an elephant mount, or from an elephant mount to a mansion. This person, I say, is exactly similar. It is in this way, great king, that a person is one headed from darkness to light. And how, great king, is a person one-headed from light to light? Here, some person has been reborn in a high family, an affluent Khattiya family, an affluent Brahmin family, or an affluent householder family, one which is rich, with great wealth and property, with abundant gold and silver, abundant treasures and commodities, with abundant wealth and grain, and he is handsome, attractive, graceful, possessing supreme beauty of complexion. He is one who gains food, drink, clothing, and vehicles, garlands, scents, and ointments, bedding, housing, and lighting. He engages in wholesome conduct of body, speech, and mind. Having done so, with the breakup of the body after death, he is reborn in a good destination, in a heavenly world. Suppose, great king, a man would cross over from palanquin to palanquin, or from horseback to horseback, or from elephant mount to elephant mount, or from mansion to mansion. This person, I say, is exactly similar. It is in this way, great king, that a person is one-headed from light to light. Okay, so let me help you understand what the Buddha is teaching you here. So here, remember during the lifetime of the Buddha that there was a strong caste system in place, that if you were born to a family that was considered a low family or poor or doing kind of basic working laborious work, then they were considered to be, kind of destined for an unproductive life or unfulfilling life, or just kind of like a basic life, kind of subsisting with the basic things that you need. If you were born into an affluent family or a high family, people looked at you as being very high. And of course, you were able to easily acquire the basic necessities that you need in life, and you would have those in abundance. And oftentimes people's life and the way they conducted their life going forward was all based on what family you were born into. If you were born into a high family, it would be very easy for you in society to move forward. And if you're born into a lower family, it would be very challenging for you. And in some places, this even still exists today. But what the Buddha is explaining and what he taught all throughout his life is it's not a matter of where you're born that determines what you will experience in life. It's about how you conduct yourself. It's about your bodily actions, your verbal actions, and your mental actions. By training your mind and becoming wise about your bodily actions, your verbal actions, and your mental actions, you can move forward in life and you can experience a better and better and better life. Because what we experience in life isn't based on where we're born and what family we're being born into. What we experience in life is based on our decisions. It's cause and effect, or action and result. While someone being born into a family that lacks resources might have certain obstacles and certain struggles to overcome, being born into a family that is rich or affluent or having lots of resources, they have certain obstacles to overcome too. So overcoming these obstacles is what you're working towards on this path to enlightenment. And like what Chrissy asked a question about is having an obstacle of, working and having to work and needing to work and maybe not being able to focus on class. This is an obstacle to overcome. So that's why you do the best you can in those situations. So all of us have certain obstacles that we need to overcome in whatever experience that we're having in this world. But we don't do that through good luck or through chance or anything like that. We do that through cultivating wisdom, making wise decisions, and improving our life as we go forward by making wise decisions. So the Buddha is explaining in the first part of each one of these paragraphs the situation that a person is actually born into, where they're either lacking certain resources and they're having challenges to acquire certain resources, in their bodies are not functioning a certain way, and so forth. But then he says, okay, if you engage in this wholesome conduct by body, speech, and mind, then that's what's going to lead to an improved rebirth in your next birth. But remember, his goal and the goal of the path to enlightenment is not to experience rebirth. The goal is to gain wisdom, train your mind in this life to experience enlightenment, so there is no longer any rebirth. That's what would lead to an improved existence in this life, and then you're not going to experience rebirth. So the very things that lead to an improved rebirth in the next life are the same exact things that lead to enlightenment in this life. And what he really focuses in on here is one who engages in wholesome conduct by body, speech, and mind. Because when you train your mind on the Eightfold Path in the moral conduct and all the other teachings that the Buddha shares, you'll be able to effortlessly practice this wholesome conduct by body, speech, and mind, your life will be so peaceful. It'll be so serene. It'll be so calm. It'll be so joyful because you'll deeply understand with wisdom, and you would have trained the mind to practice this wisdom, that you will effortlessly practice not harming others through your body, speech, and mind. And then you can just be at ease, where now it might be somewhat of a struggle and difficult in certain situations to treat people and to conduct yourself with wholesome body, speech, and mind, because you still got those cravings in there, you still got certain anger, and you still got certain ignorance or unknowing of true reality. So it's cultivating the wisdom that leads to this improved wisdom, which allows you to eliminate craving, which allows you to eliminate anger, allows you to eliminate this ignorance or unknowing of true reality, and arise this wholesome bodily, speech, and mental conduct. And that's what's going to lead to an improved rebirth, but it's also what's going to lead to enlightenment in this life. So if somebody is in a low family and they then gain this wisdom and are moving towards the light, so to speak, the Buddha is calling this moving from the darkness to the light. But he also describes someone who has a lot of resources, born into an affluent family. If they are choosing to do this, he's calling it moving from the light to light, right? So it really doesn't matter in terms of what family you're born into. You can gain the wisdom to move from wherever you are in life at this point to an improved experience in this life through gaining wisdom, making wise decisions, training the mind. The goal would be not to experience rebirth, but if you fell short of enlightenment and needed to experience rebirth, then you'll have the ability to experience an improved rebirth because you've improved your wisdom in this life and you've improved your moral conduct in this life. What questions do you guys have on this chapter? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions in YouTube, Facebook, or Zoom. So we'll go ahead and move to the next chapter, which is chapter 27. All right, so this one is harmoniously without disputes. Monks, wherever monks are residing in calmness, harmoniously, without disputes, blending like milk and water, viewing each other with eyes of affection, I am at ease about going there, let alone about directing my attention there. I conclude, surely those venerable ones have abandoned 3 things and cultivated another 3. What are the 3 things they have abandoned? 1. Sensual thoughts. 2. Thoughts of ill will. 3. Thoughts of harming. These are the 3 things they have abandoned. What are the 3 things they have cultivated? 1. Thoughts of renunciation or letting go. 2. Thoughts of goodwill. 3. Thoughts of harmlessness. These are the 3 things they have cultivated. Wherever monks are residing in calmness, harmoniously, without disputes, blending like milk and water, viewing each other with eyes of affection, I am at ease about going there, let alone about directing my attention there. I conclude, surely those venerable ones have abandoned these 3 things and cultivated these 3 other things. Okay, let me help you guys understand what the Buddha is teaching here. The Buddha taught in an area that today we call Northeast India. And in that region, the way that he would move around is essentially walk from village to village. As he was invited to various villages or various dwellings, he would go to those places and he would teach as people invited him to teach. And people ended up building him temples as he was becoming more and more known, and people knew that he was enlightened. People would donate their land and they would build temples and give him a place to teach where he could teach, and then people could just come and learn from him. And what he's describing here is as he moves around from population to population, because these ordained practitioners, they wouldn't all just follow him wherever he would go. They would dwell in certain places in different regions, and then he would just go from place to place, and there would be villagers that he would be teaching, but there would also be ordained practitioners there that he'd be teaching as well. And what he's explaining is that if there's this harmonious way of conducting themselves without disputes, where they're not arguing, where there's calmness and there's no disputes, and people are blending like milk and water, he knows that he can be at ease, going to this place, and he will direct his attention there and share the teachings. But in order for one to be able to experience that, where they are at ease and they have calmness and they're harmonious and there's not disputes and there's these eyes of affection, then they would need to have abandoned sensual thoughts, thoughts of ill will, and thoughts of harming. This is essentially right intention from the Eightfold Path. If you look at right intention as part of the Eightfold Path, there's 3 aspects of this that the Buddha teaches you to cultivate. He teaches you to cultivate these thoughts of renunciation, thoughts of non-ill will or goodwill, and thoughts of harmlessness, right? And in order to cultivate these, you would need to abandon sensual thoughts, thoughts of ill will, and thoughts of harming. What sensual thoughts are is having sensual desire, where you're wanting things to always be pleasing. If you want things to always be pleasing and you have sensual desire and that's your intention, then there's craving in the mind, there's longing and yearning. So if you train your mind to not be longing and yearning for sensual thoughts, you train the mind to have renunciation where you're letting go, then you can reside at ease. And if you're practicing goodwill or non-ill will, and you're practicing harmlessness, you'll be at ease. You won't have disputes with people because you've deeply trained the mind to practice these 3 aspects of right intention. So the Buddha and an enlightened being would be comfortable being anywhere and anywhere. But as an individual who's making wise decisions, you're going to choose to be at certain places and share your teachings with certain people. So if there's a group of ordained practitioners who are arguing and disputing with each other and discontent, the Buddha's not going to enter into that situation and start trying to teach, because those people are so discontent, nothing's going to get through to them. So he would rather go to this other group of people where they're calm, they're looking at each other with eyes of affection, they're blending like milk and water. So let me share teachings here because they're going to be more well received, they're going to be more beneficial. So he's going to make wise decisions about where to teach. You might think that if a Buddha saw people arguing and festering and disputing, that he would jump in the middle of it and stop it. That's not his job. A teacher's job is not to restrain the mind of their students. The students need to learn how to restrain their mind themselves, because the teacher's not going to be around all the time. If the teacher is always the one who steps in and breaks up a fight, so to speak, or breaks up a dispute, the students never learn the effects of their own arguing. They never learn the effects of what they're actually doing through being argumentative, and they never learn how to restrain their mind. So a teacher's job isn't to restrain their students. A teacher's job is to share the wisdom to restrain your mind, and how to restrain your mind, and how to train your mind. And then it's up to the students on their own independent journey to be able to do that for themselves. It's not up to the teacher to restrain their student's mind. And you might think that a Buddha would jump in there and, break up that dispute. But oftentimes it's unwise to jump in the middle of a dog fight, or if a bunch of cats are fighting with each other, it's unwise to jump into that, right? Because you're going to be right in the middle of all that. Instead, sometimes it's better to just let them be, right? So if there's these human beings that are fighting and bickering, hey, they need to experience the results of their decisions in order to see how unwise it is, right? So here, a Buddha, an enlightened being, they're going to make a wise decision. They're not going to necessarily teach everybody, because not everybody is teachable. There's some people in the world that aren't teachable. They don't have an open mind. Their ego is up too high. They have certain expectations. They want certain things from their teacher. They want their teacher to do it this way, or they want their teacher to do it that way. Or in some cases, a student will try to teach their teacher and try to tell the teacher what they should and shouldn't do. In these situations and others, it's not wise for a teacher to continue to teach somebody. It's just a waste of time. So a teacher is going to invest their time, effort, energy, and resources in the places where the teachings are going to be well received, and where there's this renunciation or this letting go, this open-mindedness, where a student is open to understanding the teachings, where there's these thoughts of goodwill or loving kindness, where there's these thoughts of harmlessness, then the teachings are going to be well received, and it's wise to teach in that type of environment. And that's where people are calm, they're harmonious, they're without disputes, they're blending like milk and water, and they have this eyes of affection for each other. What questions do you guys have on this chapter? You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, and I will help you to understand whatever questions you have. All right, I'm not seeing any questions. So let's move on to the next chapter, which is chapter 28. Here, the Buddha is explaining disputes arise from craving. So before he was explaining that, it's right intention that's going to ensure that you have the right intention and you aren't disputing. But now he's going to teach you what the cause of disputes are. It's craving, desire, attachment. But here, he's explaining it to you in this cause and effect, this action and result. He's showing you and leading you through step by step of what leads to disputes. So here he starts with, craving is the cause of seeking. Seeking is a cause of gaining material possessions. Gaining material possessions is a cause of evaluating. Evaluating is a cause of desire. Desire is a cause of clinging. Clinging is a cause of possessiveness. Possessiveness is a cause of stinginess. Stinginess is a cause of guarding possessions. And because of guarding possessions, many unwholesome, unskillful things come to be. There arise the taking up of stick and sword or weapons, fights, disputes, arguments, accusations, harsh speech, lying, and other evil, unskillful states. So here he's showing you how all of this stuff that he's explaining all comes back to craving, right? So it's that mental longing and strong eagerness, chasing after the objects of your affection, craving permanence, wanting things to be a certain way. That craving, it's going to produce seeking, where the mind is looking outside of itself to be fulfilled. It's looking outside of itself for some external object to create fulfillment. So because there's craving in the mind, then the mind is going to then have this seeking where it's looking around for some external object that provides some inner satisfaction. And because of that, there's seeking, there's then going to be this gaining of material possessions, this taking up of material possessions. Then because of this taking up of material possessions, there's going to be this evaluating where you're judging and looking. Is my car better than their car? Is my house better than their house? Are my clothes better than their clothes? Is my jewelry better than their jewelry? Right? And where you observe that you need something better because of that evaluating, now there's going to be this desire. My jewelry isn't as nice as theirs. I need more jewelry. Or my house isn't as nice as theirs. I need a better house. Now, because of the desire arising in the mind, there's this clinging where the mind is holding on, right? Which is leading to possessiveness, where now this is mine. This is my jewelry. This is my house, my car, right? And now because of that possessiveness, now there's this stinginess, this unwillingness to share. There's this lack of generosity. There's not a willingness to give and share your time, effort, energy, and resources because the mind is clinging, then it's possessive, and now it becomes stingy. Because of the stinginess, then there's this guarding of possessions, trying to protect everything and guard it. This is mine, 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 mine. And now, because of the guarding of possessions, there's many unwholesome, unskillful things that arise. What arises is the taking up of stick and sword or weapons, right? This is where people will go out and buy weapons to protect what it is that they have. Then there's fights, disputes, arguments, accusations, harsh speech, lying, and other unskillful states that arise in the mind. All of this is being traced back to craving, right? So you can trace it all back to craving, and this is one of the reasons why you're working on this path to eliminate craving, so that you don't experience discontentedness and the mind doesn't then become unskillful. Because when there's craving, the mind gets the object of its affection, it gets pleasant feelings. But when it experiences these painful feelings, the mind oftentimes then becomes unskillful with its moral conduct through the intention, speech, and actions. And you would like to circumvent all that and eliminate all that. And you do that by eliminating craving. Questions on this chapter? All right, I'm not seeing any questions on YouTube, and I'm not seeing any on Facebook either. Just to let you guys know, right now, rainy season is starting in Thailand. So typically at the beginning of rainy season, we lose electric, we lose internet connection quite a bit. And that's been happening for the last few days. So in some of these classes in the next few weeks, if I lose internet connection, you'll understand why. Of course, it's impermanence, but it's all because of the rainy season. There's cars that'll get in accidents and knock over power lines or disrupt internet cables, and there'll be wind that'll blow signs down and knock over cables and things like this. So I'm not seeing any questions in Facebook or YouTube or even Zoom. So let's go to our next chapter, which is chapter 29. Here, this is titled Dependent Origination. I'll let you guys know that this isn't dependent origination in its full entirety. That's going to be discussed in Volume 5, Chapter 14. Instead, this is just a little encapsulation of dependent origination, giving you a little introduction to it. Here, what it says is, when this exists, that comes to be. With the arising of this, that arises. When this does not exist, that does not come to be. With the elimination of this, that ceases. So essentially what dependent origination will do for you when you see it in its entirety is it shows this cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect of 12 interlinking steps that leads to discontentedness and rebirth. When you first start studying the teachings of the Buddha, you learn the Four Noble Truths, that it's craving, desire, attachment that leads to discontentedness and causes discontentedness. But when you go deeper, you learn about craving, anger, and ignorance. You go deeper, you understand the 10 fetters, and then you go even deeper, you understand the highest, most ultimate truth, which is dependent origination, and these 12 interlinking steps that the Buddha takes you all the way through and shows you how you experience discontentedness and rebirth. It's the ultimate truth of the teachings of the Buddha. And this is this cause and effect, this causality or causal relationship between each one of these conditions that he explains in the detailed version of dependent origination. Here in this little encapsulated version, it's just showing you this cause and effect, that when this exists, that comes to be. With the arising of this, that arises. That's what we just explored in the previous chapter when it relates to craving, and he showed you this cause and effect or this dependent origination of how craving ultimately leads to unskillful conduct. And then when this does not exist, that does not come to be. With the elimination of this, that ceases. So in that previous chapter where we're talking about craving leading to unskillful conduct, well, that's because when this exists, that comes to be. With the arising of craving, that arises, the unskillful conduct arises. But when this does not exist, when craving does not exist, that does not come to be. So when craving does not exist, unskillful conduct does not come to be. With the elimination of this, with the elimination of craving, that ceases. So with the elimination of craving, the unskillful conduct will also cease. So this is why you're training your mind on the path to enlightenment using the Eightfold Path, gaining the wisdom, the moral conduct, and the mental discipline, because there's this causal effect. And by dissecting this through dependent origination, which you'll ultimately do in this program, then you'll be able to get to the point where you can see this causality and you can completely unravel it. And you can get to the point where the mind's peaceful and joyful all the time because you've unraveled all the conditions that are causing discontentedness and leading to rebirth. And you'll be able to see that when we study that. Any questions on this chapter? Let's see, we have a question coming in on YouTube. How to know which is craving and which is not? Okay, so the way that you identify craving is there's going to be a longing and a yearning. And of course, there's this spectrum, right? There's this mental longing and strong eagerness, chasing after the objects of your affection. You'll feel like the mind is pulling towards something. But then there's kind of lighter versions of that as well. But if you're experiencing discontentedness, there's craving in the mind. You need to investigate the mind. You need to look inward and be able to see that the mind wants certain things, that it expects certain things. So when you experience conditioned pleasant feelings, painful feelings, or feelings that are neither painful nor pleasant, rather than blaming other people for these conditioned feelings, you would like to sit down and look at the mind and figure out what is it that the mind is longing and yearning for that is causing this discontentedness to arise. The mind is having this chasing. It's wanting the objects of its affection. It's wanting something external to fulfill this inner mind. It thinks that if it can just obtain the objects of its affection, that it will be inwardly satisfied. But this doesn't work because you can't grab onto an external object to create lasting satisfaction in the mind, because that object is impermanent. So therefore, any feelings that you base on that, it's going to be impermanent as well. So the mind is chasing, thinking the next new shiny object around the corner is going to provide some kind of lasting satisfaction. Okay. All right. So that takes care of our question in YouTube. Let's see if we have any in Facebook. I don't see any there, and I don't see any in Zoom either. So let's move on to the next chapter, which is chapter 30. This is the last one for today. So here, this one is titled Cause of Ill Will. So before, the Buddha taught the cause of unskillful conduct is this arising of craving, right? So now he's going to teach you the cause of ill will, because the one before was helping you to understand this cause of disputes and what leads to disputes and this unwholesome conduct. Now he's going to teach you the cause of ill will. So here there's somebody asking a question. It says, by what fetters, sir, are beings bound? Gods, humans, asaras, nagas, ganabas, and whatever other kinds there may be, whereby, although they aspire to live without hate, harming, hostility, or ill will, and in peace, they yet live in hate, harming one another, hostile, and with ill will. So the question here is, what are the pollutions of mind? What are the taints? What are the fetters that are causing somebody who would like to live in peace, but yet they live in hate, they live in harm, they live with hostility and ill will? So even though they might be aspiring to be peaceful, they are actually residing, harming others, hostility and ill will. What is it that's causing this? What are the pollutions? What are the fetters? What are the taints? So here the Buddha replies, ruler of the gods, because this must be this heavenly being that is asking the Buddha this question. So he's addressing this being as ruler of the gods. It is the bonds of jealousy and material gain that bind beings, so that, though they aspire to live without hate, harming, hostility, or ill will, and in peace, they yet live in hate, harming one another, hostile, and with ill will. But, sir, what gives rise to jealousy and material gain? What is their origin? How are they born? How do they arise? Owing to the presence of what do they arise? Owing to the absence of what do they not arise? Jealousy and material gain, ruler of the gods, take rise from happiness and sadness. This is their origin. This is how they are born, how they arise. When these are present, they arise. When these are absent, they do not arise. But, sir, what gives rise to happy and sad? What is their origin? What are they born? How do they arise? Owing to the presence of what do they arise? Owing to the absence of what do they not arise? They arise, ruler of the gods, from craving desire. Due to the presence of craving desire, they arise. Due to absence of craving desire, they do not arise. Okay, so here the Buddha is basically helping one to understand what leads to living with this hate and this harm. It's craving, desire, attachment. If there's this mental longing and strong eagerness in the mind, you get the objects of your affection, you experience these pleasant feelings, but they're conditioned feelings. They're not going to last. The mind is happy. But then when you don't get the objects of your affection, the mind now moves to sadness or these painful feelings. So when there's happiness and sadness, now the mind experiences this jealousy and material gain. Because oftentimes when the mind is experiencing sadness, the only way that the unenlightened mind, the untrained mind, knows how to get to pleasant feelings and how to get to something else other than these painful feelings that it finds uncomfortable is through craving, desire, attachment, through longing and yearning for some material object. The mind tries to move from these painful feelings to happiness. So you might find that when your mind is experiencing painful feelings like sadness, anger, or others, that your cravings start to arise where you want to grab onto something and you're trying to get to happiness. But that's part of the whole problem. You need to cut that off and let it go. But here the Buddha is explaining that when the mind goes from having craving and experiencing happiness and sadness, now when the mind is sad, it's going to experience this jealousy and want this material gain. And then when there's this material gain that it wants, it now experiences this hate and harming one another, because you then become jealous of what other people might have. And now you want those same things, or you want better than them. Again, this craving, desire, attachment is the mind seeking something external in order to fulfill the mind. The mind thinks that if I can just get the objects of my affection, if I can just get this external thing, then I will be pleased. I will have this inner fulfillment. I will be satisfied. But this is the delusion. This is the ignorance or the unknowing of true reality. The mind doesn't understand that as long as you're craving and you're trying to latch on to this external thing, that there's no way that the mind can actually experience this lasting inner fulfillment, because it's basing its inner feelings on some impermanent object. In this condition of, I got a new pair of shoes, I got a new pair of shoes, those shoes aren't going to be new permanently. So you might experience temporary happiness, but it's only a matter of time before someone steals your shoes, before you misplace them, before they get old and beat up or some other thing like this. And now the mind moves to the sadness. So as long as craving, desire, attachment is in the mind, not only are you going to have disputes like what you just saw in the previous chapter, but there's going to be this ill will in the mind, that the mind is, although maybe aspiring to live in peace, there's going to be this hate, this harming, this hostility, looking at others as an enemy. And you would like to eliminate the craving in order to eliminate this hate or harming or hostility or ill will in the mind. So there you can reside peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy when there's no craving in the mind. Let me see what questions you guys have on this. You can put it into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, and I'll see your questions there, or you can raise your hand and ask any questions that you like. You're welcome, Jacqueline. I see your comment here thanking me for the teaching, and she's thanking everybody else as well. I'm sure thanking you for your questions and participation in the class. You're very welcome, Jacqueline. All right, I'm not seeing any questions. Oh, here we go. Do we have to let go of the mind as well? Where does that leave us? So you're letting go of thinking that the mind is who you are as a person, right? You're not letting go in terms of eliminating it. You know, oftentimes when people think of this word letting go, you think that you're eliminating it. So for example, a mobile phone, the possession itself or the mind itself isn't the attachment. The attachment is how the mind relates to this object. So you're going to have a mobile phone, you're going to have clothes, you're going to have a car, you're going to have a house perhaps, you're going to have different possessions. But what you're eliminating is the craving, the longing, the yearning for it to be permanent. If you're longing for this phone to be permanent and you're getting this satisfaction, this happiness, excitement because of the new phone, well, it's only a matter of time before the phone gets old, it slows down, it gets a scratch, you drop it and the screen breaks or what have you. And if you have craving, desire, attachment for this phone to be permanent, then when that happens, you're going to experience painful feelings. So you don't have to eliminate the phone. You just need to eliminate the longing and yearning, the craving, the desire for it to be permanent. So you're not eliminating the mind. You're eliminating holding on to the mind and clinging to the mind, thinking that this is who you are as a person. This is part of the universal truth of non-self. So you just need to let that go. But you're going to have the mind as long as you're in existence. There's going to be a mind. So you can't physically let the mind go. The mind is going to be there. You just need to train the mind to be purified and don't identify with these feelings, the perceptions, the decisions, or the consciousness itself as being who you are as a person. Any identity that's in the mind, like I am American, or I am a Buddhist teacher, or I am a father, or I am this, or I am that. Any job that you have, this I am, that's what you're working to eliminate and let go of. Not the mind itself. The mind is going to be there, but you're letting go of the craving, desire, the clinging to this, thinking that this is who you are as a person. That's what will bring you to peacefulness, in addition to all the other teachings that you need to learn and practice. I see Donnie here saying thank you as well. You're welcome, Donnie. Pleased to help you and share the teachings with you. All right, it looks like all the questions have been answered for today. Oh, another question here. Will the mind be blank? When the mind moves to this enlightened mental state, the mind will be peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. There'll be deep wisdom in the mind. The mind won't be empty per se, in terms of you will have deep wisdom. You will have a deep memory when you get to enlightenment. So you'll have things in the mind, but the mind will be empty in terms of you won't have the unwholesome qualities. You won't have the pollution of mind. The mind will be fully purified. But the mind's going to have deep wisdom by the time you get to enlightenment. So I don't think of it as the mind will be blank. I would say no, the mind isn't going to be blank. There's going to be deep wisdom, there's going to be loving kindness, there's going to be compassion, sympathetic joy, there's going to be equanimity, there's going to be all these wholesome qualities that are in the mind. There's going to be humbleness, there's going to be all these different things that are in the mind. So I wouldn't think about it as the mind being blank, but the mind is purified of the pollutions that are hindering it from experiencing this radiance, this brightness, as the mind moves closer and closer to this enlightened mental state. All right, I don't see any other questions. This is wonderful that you guys had lots of different questions for today. I'll just go ahead and end the class here by reminding you that next week we're going to be exploring the next set of chapters 31 through 40. You can read ahead if you like, read the chapters, because you've got the words of the Buddha, you got those references that you can go back to the original source text. And you've also got the reflections that I'm sharing to help you better understand the chapter and understanding how to implement it into your practice. So you'll be able to see all of that if you're reading the chapters ahead of time, and that will help to inform you so that as you come to class, you'll be able to ask questions that will help you get clarity of how to learn, reflect, and practice these particular teachings. So thank you all for your questions. Thank you all for attending. It's been wonderful to share these teachings with you. Tomorrow in our group learning program, we're going to be in chapter 6, which is titled The Middle Way, Walking the Middle Way. This is a teaching that will help you to understand how to bring the mind to the middle, not chasing things with craving, desire, attachment, and also not being indifferent and unmotivated and unenthusiastic either. Learning how to bring the mind to the middle and fine-tuning the mind there. On Wednesday, we're going to be in the third part of our 4-part series, where I'm sharing with you Buddhist chanting. So if you're interested in learning Buddhist chanting, if you're interested in practicing that, if you're interested in doing meditation, we're going to be using Buddhist chanting to ease into the meditation, doing meditation together, and then easing out with the chanting as well. So thank you again. I appreciate your dedication and diligence to learning. We'll see you guys in one of these future classes. Have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. Sawadee khap.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.